Welcome, everyone, to the first episode of UBBA Unplugged, the only podcast bringing you insights from utility industry leaders that only the Utility Broadband Alliance can. I'm your host, Trip Winkler, and we're kicking this podcast off with a special guest. Joining me is Carlos Carazo, Managing Director of Digital Grid Services and Information Technologies at Southern California Edison. Carlos, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. How you doing, Trip?
I'm doing wonderful. Hope you are.
Yep. No, hey, looking forward to this.
Great. Well, hey, let's dive right into it. If you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about yourself and why telecommunications is such a passion for you.
Well, yeah, thank you. So funny enough, I've been in the telecommunication industry pretty much my whole career. I'm a California native who went to Cal Poly Pomona and graduated with the CIS degree with a minor in telecommunications. In my junior year, I was told about an internship position at Southern California Edison. I applied for it and was, luckily the candidate that was awarded that internship position. That internship position was in the network installation group. So I was actually very fortunate to be in this organization when the first networks for the company were being built. These are the networks that we manage now today. But my passion came at the time as I was taking classes and watching how some of these first networks were being implemented, really understanding the importance of these technologies. I'm going to date myself, right? We're talking about the 1980s when networks were just starting to be built and computers were just being connected to them. But I remember at the time it was fascinating to me that a computer connected to the network can interact with another computer, what one person can interact with the other. And so, like I said, really fascinated me, and it's something that, to this day, I hold dearly that that uniqueness of a new technology at the time and the capabilities kind of drew me to it. And here I am. But even with that, as I mentioned, I've had the opportunity to grow within the company and realized through my journey how critical the telecommunication networks are for utilities. In the early days, it was mostly to try to connect, email to email connection and some business applications. The SCADA systems, telemetry were some of the big components of the network. But as we head into this future world of the future digital grid, the network is just going to be so foundational in enabling so many use cases that the electric grid is going to need to do to provide, clean energy. So yeah, like I said, I've done my whole career at Edison, and I've been in and out of telecom. And today, I get to manage the network that I helped start to build over 30 years ago.
Wonderful. Well, speaking of the digital future for everyone and for the digitalization of the electric grid, what does that future of digital transformation look like from the utility industry's perspective?
So I'd be lying to you if I told you, we have it all figured out what that vision eventually is going to be, because I think we're just at the beginning of that journey. And there's so many things that are going to come at us that we're not even aware of today. So, but with that said, point in time, I think the goal, the existing vision for the digital grid and the goal of where we wanted to get to would be that we would be able to develop a self-healing grid, electric grid, right, that heals itself, on any reliability issues, that it is 100% clean energy. And has the ability to have enough intelligence in it to understand where the power flows should go at any point in time, and then obviously affordable for our customers. Having all those capabilities and still being affordable is extremely important. So I would anchor on probably those three words, right? A continued reliable grid that is clean and affordable is the true vision. And having the intelligence embedded in it to be able to do all of that is going to be the future digital grid.
Very cool. Well, tell me a little bit about how broadband communication plays into that digital future. What role do you see it playing in the electric grid of tomorrow?
Well, the as I touched upon at the very beginning, right? So when you think about telecommunications, I would say none of this can be enabled without telecommunications. When you think about the future electric grid, there is going to be so much information, right, that's going to be flowing from it on across it on the health of the grid, on endpoints, right? Endpoints like microgrids, battery storage, all these DER, distributed generation, right, components that are wanting to sell into the grid. Having the intelligence to understand, right, how to allow for two-way power flow and how to best manage it, but also going all the way to the customer, right? We're talking right now about grid edge compute, our AMI 2.0 capabilities, now having a meter at the edge that actually hopefully will go into the customer home and provide better information and maybe even some control capabilities that allow us to really optimize cost and usage within, with the customer's home. So there's so many new capabilities that are coming with this digital grid, but none of that could happen if you don't have the foundational communications network that would allow all that intelligence to flow either to the cloud or to be done right at the edge or sent back to the data centers. You're going to have the need for a broadband wireless network that allows for those capabilities, and it just becomes foundational for the future grid.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, not to pull this thread, more than we need to, but, this is certainly a very future focused subject. So how did you go about convincing your executives at Southern California Edison about the need for PLTE and spectrum?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because I know I would say, hey, it was a challenge for us when we went through it, and I know in my interaction with UBBA, little UBBA plug there, as we have the ability to interface with many other executives and other utilities just like ours, part of the challenge is trying to be able to build that business case on how to use, it's a significant investment, right? How do you justify that significant investment? For us, like most, I think I would say that, I've seen many utilities use I'll call it a burning platform, no pun intended, to the wildfires, but it is, right? Every utility has similar use cases. However, there is one that probably is on the forefront that can be leveraged, and that could be anything from, I know San Diego Gas and Electric used wildfire as an example. It's a huge component, a huge risk, and the need for communications to be able to manage that was important. I've seen other use cases being built off of utilities having somewhere between 15 to 20 plus different point solution wireless networks that become very costly to maintain, and they come with cybersecurity risk. So building a business case around optimizing those down to one manageable strategic wireless network that is reliable, has more capabilities, and is cyber secure, becomes a pretty good use case. So I think that different utilities are at different points in time of what's going on within them. On one hand, they have to find what is that best use case that kind of helps them, justify it. On top of that, I would add, I know for us, we had a lot of conversation with our senior executives also about, strategically, it's the right thing to do. As I mentioned earlier, if you really think about all the use cases, I believe that we had even not thought of yet that are going to come with the future electric grid, it is going to pay itself over 100 times over. And for us, we built a wireless network, a fiber network back in the mid 1990s, and the original business case that was developed for it was traditional SCADA and telemetry. There were use cases back in the 1990s that had not even been thought about as computers and more use cases on how we use computers and data. That now that that broadband wired network has paid itself, like I said, so many times over. The same thing's going to happen with the wireless. There's things that we know about today already, everything from trying to use it for AMI backhaul, for mobile radio, for distribution SCADA, for field workers connectivity. Wire down is another use case, right? The ability to actually de-energize a wire before it hits the floor, and having that quick latency at the edge to be able to do that. There's already so many use cases, but then there's also so many more that we had not even thought of. So when you're able, I think, to paint the picture in the strategic value of this network associated to the cost, I think it really starts to make sense for everybody on how important this is. One adder to that, though, because I know spectrum is another space where I think utilities have challenges trying to justify the cost of spectrum, and we did as well. Just like every other utility is going to have to go through that business case. And I've heard people ask, how do you sell spectrum to your senior executives? I've heard some people say, it's bandwidth in the air. For us, one thing I think that was important, and we used almost a real estate analogy. At the end of the day, you're almost buying, right? Spectrum is like buying real estate, and it gets valued like real estate. It is an asset, and it's not, although it's invisible, it is an asset, and it does have a cost that continues to evaluate nicely over the years. So from a risk standpoint, right? I know there's a lot of concerns about, oh my God, if I buy spectrum, if I lease spectrum, do I at some point potentially lose on that? You don't. It's an asset, just like property is, and it's done from a valuation standpoint pretty well over the years, and it's only going to get more and more expensive because it's becoming more and more critical. So like I said, I think educating your senior executives and using different angles and talking to other utilities that have been able to make that business case to see how they sold it, I think is important.
Absolutely. Well, that kind of leads into where I was going. It seems like there's so much information out there. I can only imagine how difficult it can sometimes be for a utility to navigate the quote unquote right path forward. What advice would you have for other utilities out there struggling to find the right information on how to move towards that future?
Yeah, so luckily, I would say for some of the utilities right now, they're probably in a better place than we were 5 years ago, because I think we found ourselves at the very beginning of this journey, and there was only maybe a handful of us, and so you really had to do a really good job of, like I said, understanding the technology and educating them on the value of it. I think there's now other resources that can be leveraged, UBBA one, right? So the vision and the beauty of UBBA was to develop a utility consortium of different utilities that are going to be going through these same challenges, to kind of share information on how they built use cases, to how their installations are going, lessons learned across the industry, and then also be able to influence our ecosystem of partners that on what utility requirements are we looking for, so that they could actually start to develop products to utility standards. So UBBA has been, like I said, I think a great venue for utilities to be able to join and hear from other utilities. I mean, like I mentioned, we're all kind of cousins, brothers and sisters in this space. For the most part, you're like I said, these use cases kind of travel across. They're different priorities at different times, but we all have pretty much about 80-90% of the same use cases. So being able to learn from them on everything from, like I mentioned earlier, right? How do you develop your business case, to once you got your business case and you're starting to purchase, what are some of the pitfalls that others have found in either going through the process, the RFP process, to starting the implementation process. So for me, it's really about continuing to share and educate as much as you can.
Excellent. Well, now this next question I've got, I've heard you actually posed this one to a panel of CIOs, so I'm looking forward to hearing your answer to it. But imagine you're the captain of a ship sailing through rough waters, carrying critical cargo. And one of your cargo boxes says ERM. You know where I'm going with this. One of the boxes says collaboration tools, and the last box says broadband communications. Now, all at once, your ship gets struck by a massive wave and all the cargo goes overboard. You have the opportunity to save one box, but only one box. Which one do you save and why?
What a great question, Triff. Thank you. As you mentioned, yeah, that was one of my closing questions, I think, at the last UBBA that I posed to the CIO panel. So I'm going to answer it. My answer is going to be probably a little bit different than what we heard on the panel from the CIOs. And no disrespect to them, but I think I have the right answer. Right. So for me, the answer is I would be saving broadband communication. A lot about what we talked about here. The answers I think that we got at the time, the feeling was that they would save ERM because the enterprise resource management systems manage the company's business. My feedback to them would be that would not be possible if you do not have a communications network for all that information to flow around through. So right, you would just have a lot of boxes sitting in a lot of data centers and a lot of people at their desks not being able to communicate with any of the information. So a broadband communications network, both wired and wireless, once again, are foundational and critical, right, to not just running the business side of the utility business, but the grid side. The OT side depends on that network, as we talked about earlier, for SCADA information, for telemetry. And as you look into the future, right, being able to interact with your customers at the edge, being able to control our DERs that are going to be coming onto the grid. I mean, it has been critical for the utilities since they've been around, and they're actually even becoming more critical to how the utility is going to be doing business in the future. It really is a critical asset, and it kind of sits, to me, at the top of the list of the ones we just talked about. So that would have been how I answered the question a year ago, and that's how I answer the question today. I think the fact of how the CIOs answered that question, I think, still gives us an opportunity, I think, within UBBA and within the telecommunication managers on realizing that I think there's a lot of education that still needs to happen on why these networks are important. I think they get taken for granted sometimes, and because they're always up and they're managed nicely, they get a little bit taken for granted. It's once we have a problem that people realized how critical they are. But I think it's, like I mentioned, I think it still demonstrates that we have some work to do in educating our senior most leaders of the company on why, the networks are a critical component of not just today's electric grid, but even more so in the future.
Absolutely. Well, and for my part of it, I think that question, the way you pose it, is an excellent way to bridge that gap. It certainly made me think a lot more critically about the options as well. So thank you for answering that one for us. Well, before we wrap things up on this episode, I do have one final question for you. What are your parting thoughts for our listeners and our viewers?
Well, my parting thoughts, I would say, as we continue to move forward on this journey, I would say we're just at the beginning of it. So a utility like ours, who was early in the process of acquiring spectrum, building out the business case, acquiring spectrum, we're now at the beginning of our journey of implementing our first cell sites this year, and building the what I'll call the core functionality within our data centers. You were kind of on this 5 to 6 year journey now as we move forward. There are so many lessons that to be learned throughout every step of that process. We talked a lot about at the beginning of the process of how do you build a business case, that's able to sell it to our senior executives. You're right, that's a huge stepping stone, but that's only one of the many more stepping stones you're going to go through. The next one is, okay, so who are the best partners of choice that exist out there, and there's a handful, and we've had various ones. that we've worked with, and I think there's some good ones, and I think every utility has to go through their process to figure out which one makes the most sense for them. But right, that's still, once again, another milestone that you have to educate yourself on and kind of go through. The next one after that is, once you prove one, implementing a field area network is difficult. It's although private LTE networks have existed within the carrier business and the technology is soundproof, the customization of it, the configurations for utilities are a little bit different. And going through that process of understanding how to configure it appropriately for all the use cases that the utilities need, that's a little bit of a journey. And once again, we're at the beginning of it. We've been fortunate to have two things: UBBA, once again, another plug. But the other thing, we on our side, we've partnered with San Diego Gas and Electric. We've had conversations with them, Hawaiian Electric. We have conversations with Ameren. We've had conversations and try to stay connected to these other peer utilities that are going through the same process to learn from them. We're all kind of learning it a little bit at the front end of this on how to implement it, how to configure it, what are some of the pitfalls that you should avoid, how do they work within your internal process, how do you get your internal stakeholders aligned to it. All of these are kind of lessons learned that each utility is going to go through. The best thing they could do is learn some lessons from others, right? Versus trying to learn it all themselves the first time around, every step of the process. So yeah, my biggest takeaway, parting thought for all others that are going to be going through this journey, is connect into other utilities that are going through it. Learn as much as you can from them. Stay connected to them, because I think they're going to be able to help you a lot throughout the process. That's a big takeaway that I think we felt like we're very grateful to the companies that we've been able to interact with. They've been very open to share, and it's been huge for us. And we owe them, and hey, we're willing to share as well with any other utility that wants to know.
Excellent. So lean on the experience of your peers. What a great plug for UBBA.
Yep, exactly.
Absolutely. Well, that is going to wrap things up for this episode of UBBA Unplugged. Carlos, thank you again for taking time out of your evening to sit down with me and share these great insights.
Hey, it's been a pleasure, Trip. I know I was promised Joe Rogan, but hey, you've been a great host. So,
look, I'm the warm up.
I'm
the opening act. Joe comes on later, right?
There you go.
Excellent. Well, as always, be sure to follow UBBA on social media. That way you can stay up to date on all of the latest news and catch all of the latest UBBA Unplugged episodes. I'm Trip Winkler. Until next time.